Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited, I just can't hide it. The Rules Committee just finished its work, and now we'll make preparation for bringing this important American Rescue Plan to the floor of the House. It is so exciting, as you know, because of what it does. Vaccines in the arms of the American people, money in their pockets, children safely in school, workers safely back to work. It's a remarkable, historic, transformative piece of legislation which goes a very long way to crushing the virus and solving our economic crisis. It's interesting to me to see what I'm hearing on the floor during the PRO Act debate, how the Republicans are talking about their tax scam. $1.9 trillion in their tax scam. 83% of the benefits to the top 1%. And this bill, same amount of money, $1.9 trillion, overwhelmingly helping America's working families. You'll hear more about that from our colleagues as the next couple of days go by. But I just wanted to join members of our top leadership in just giving you an update as to where we are and that the Rules Committee has finished its work. Its work on something that in the 33 years that I have been in Congress and up until now, the Affordable Care Act has been the most consequential legislation that I have been a part of. This is definitely on a par with that, if not to exceed it in terms of its impact on many more poor people in our country. With that, I'm pleased to yield to our distinguished Democratic leader who knows more about this schedule than any of us for any other information or any bragging rights about this important legislation. It's not only provisions, it's pieces of bills. Mr. Richie Neal has about $1 trillion in money in people's pockets, right? And including the pension piece of it, which is a piece of legislation that went a long way to meet the needs of so many people in our country. But that's just another example. Barbara Lee talked this morning about the equity piece and how this legislation addresses the inequality of how healthcare and the vaccine and all the rest would be distributed, a piece of legislation she and others had put together. In any event, all of it excellent, all of it fair, all of it an opportunity for us to grow the economy by investing in the people, for the people. And I might say, for our Republican colleagues who they say no to the vote and they show up at the ribbon cuttings or the presentations. With that, I yield to Mr. Lee.
I was president of the Senate back in 1870 in the state of Maryland, and people would rush up to me and say, I need this in the budget, I need this in the budget, and because it was a unified document, it wasn't like appropriation bills. And okay, well, let's see if we can do that. So it's in the budget, and then, of course, they vote no. I said, well, why'd you vote no? I said, well, I couldn't vote for the budget. I said, but you asked me to put something in there. Well, yeah, you did, and I appreciate that, but I can't vote for this. So, yes, they'll be at the ribbon cuttings. They'll be there saying the schools are open, kids are in school, isn't that great? Yes, it is great. $130 billion later in this bill, and they voted against it. People have jobs. Small businesses are open. Vaccines are getting in arms. And they'll say, isn't that great? And they'll be at the vaccine delivery point. But they won't have voted for this bill. But let there be no mistake. This is not an unusual performance for our Republican colleagues. Nancy and I and Rich and Jim Clyburn have been here. I don't think you were here in 2009. Well, you were here in 2009, okay. Zero. A bill that Bernanke said would keep us out of a depression. Ben Bernanke, respected by all sides. This bill is, I agree with the Speaker, we all worked on the Affordable Health Care bill, and the Affordable Care Act was an extraordinary piece of legislation. It took a long time for the American people to understand how much value it was to them and their families, but they've done that now. And they will certainly didn't take the time on this bill, however, where we have over 70% of the American people who think this bill ought to be passed. And a majority of the Republican Party thinks this bill ought to be passed. I don't know who our Republican colleagues are listening to, but let me say, and my job is sort of focus in on the economy, the economic need for this bill. This big and bold legislation fills an urgent need for our economy. Nearly 10 million Americans are out of work compared to last March. 10 million Americans. More than 163,000 small businesses shut their doors between March and September of last year. This will help rescue a number of them. Maybe not all, but a large number. That's 800 businesses a day closing and laying off workers. The Senate's now taken action. The House will pass this bill tomorrow and send it to the president's desk. Economists and public health experts agree that we need substantial relief. This is not a controversy in the economic community. They know that we need this. It's not just another temporary relief measure like the ones enacted under the Trump administration, which, by the way, 5 bills passed in a bipartisan fashion. What was the difference? One difference. Republican president, Democratic president. TARP, Republican president, we got a significant number of Republicans, not the majority. Obama came in, they changed. Had nothing to do with substance and everything to do with politics. Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics, said that we need a plan to, quote, get to the other side of this crisis. This not only gets us to the other side of the crisis, it really starts healing the wounds that have been caused by this crisis. A joint analysis conducted by Brookings and the Hamilton Project showed that the American Rescue Plan would bring a 4% growth in GDP. That's growth. Many years we haven't had 4% GDP. This is growth in the GDP. This year, but that without this bill, real GDP would, quote, remain below the pre-pandemic level for the next several years. That's why the American people are for this bill. They may not know the specifics of it, but their gut tells them America needs this bill. That's why this bill provides families and small businesses the relief they need to stay afloat until we defeat this pandemic. Once this bill is passed, as it will be tomorrow and sent to the president, we will send it to President Biden to be signed into law so that the administration can get these resources out to communities to help businesses reopen safely, to help Americans until they can get back to work, and kids back in school, and shots in arms. This bill is an extraordinary piece of legislation that will make an extraordinary difference in the health and well-being of Americans and America. It's now my privilege to yield to somebody who's been a fighter all his life for little people, for people who need a voice, who people needed a strong person to stand up and say, look at them and help them, make them have a better life in pursuit of happiness. My friend Jim Clyburn of South Carolina.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leader, Madam Speaker, and my other distinguished colleagues. I don't think the headline that we saw in the Washington Post this morning is hyperbole by any means. In this article, it talks about what this legislation does for black farmers. And it went on to say, this may be the biggest help that black farmers have gotten since the Civil Rights Act. Now, all we have to do is take a hard look at the legislation. and you will see exactly what they're talking about. Now, a lot of times we talk about 1890. Now, I know what the 1890 program is. It's a reference to black colleges in the former slave states. We all remember, I think the speaker has talked about this several times, about Abraham Lincoln signed the land grant legislation. But because of the times in which we lived, Clemson University in my state, a land grant school, first one was Cornell, and of course people who look like me could not attend Clemson. So they came back and passed another land grant bill in 1890 for the former slave states. This legislation takes a look at the work of those 1890 schools and the discrimination that had taken place with black farmers. I used to run the South Carolina Commission for Farm Workers. And I can tell you, I'm well aware of the inequities that existed in that system. This legislation tackles that issue like no legislation we have had in my lifetime. And I think that alone makes it worthwhile. But it doesn't stop there by any means. This legislation also tackles the issue that we've had over the last several years with rural hospitals. This legislation goes straight to the heart of that matter and allows help with rural hospitals, especially those who are taxed with having to respond to COVID-19. This legislation has somewhere around $7 billion to assist these hospitals. That's why, if you look, you will see 76% of the American people support this legislation. And then that number, 71% of independents support this legislation. 60% of Republicans support this legislation. This is bipartisan legislation. It may not satisfy the partisans on both sides of the Capitol, but it satisfies Republicans. 30 Republican mayors wrote in support of this legislation. To me, it is the best piece of bipartisan legislation that I've seen here in a long, long time. And with that, I'll yield to the Assistant Speaker.
I share the Speaker's excitement over this transformative bill, and I am so grateful and honored to be up here with Chairman Yarmouth and Chairman Neal, and grateful for your work and leadership and that of your committee and your incredible staff. And to the Majority Leader and Mr. Whip, thank you for shepherding this bill through. And to our Speaker, you always put the children first. You center our work and our values around children. And women and children have been hurt so deeply during this pandemic. It has been revealed through this pandemic, the house of cards that is the foundation for women in this economy. And this bill addresses those needs. Women have lost significantly more jobs than men since the pandemic began, eviscerating more than 30 years of progress in the labor force in just 1 year. Over 2 million women were pushed out of the workforce, 1 million working moms, and many of those are women of color. 12 million children in our country are going to bed hungry. This bill provides transformative and historic solutions. It not only will meet the immediate needs, but it ensures that we will have a more inclusive economy going forward. Vaccines in the arms to get children safely back to school. $1,400 payments that will benefit 85% of adults and children in this country. An expanded tax credit that will cut child poverty in half and lift nearly 12 million people out of poverty. We will boost funding for programs that protect survivors of gender-based violence, housing and food assistance, extended unemployment assistance, child care help, not only for the child care industry, but for parents, so they can deal with the high costs of child care and get back to work. And many of our child care providers we know are women and women of color. Women are essential workers. They are moms and grandmothers. They are business owners. They are healthcare professionals. And they have been on the front line of this pandemic and this crisis. With this bill, we are taking a historical step to not only help them recover, we are sending them hope and the tools to rebuild a stronger and more just economy for all. And with that, I am very proud to yield to the outstanding Chairman of Ways and Means, Dean of our delegation, Richie Neal.
Thanks. And I want to begin by thanking the Speaker for the confidence that she exhibited in the Ways and Means Committee, and thank the members of the Ways and Means Committee and their staff assignments. This is seismic legislation, and we're on the eve now of voting it out of the House, awaiting the President's signature. As I heard Stinney and the Speaker talk about members of Congress and elected officials in a lot of purviews, would they find it easy to be at the groundbreaking and the ribbon cutting and they vote against the expenditure? It caused me a moment of nostalgia because I joined the committee when Mr. Rostenkowski was the chairman. So what he would do is, if he put the item in for you and then you voted against the bill, he just took it out. No hearings, no nothing, he just took it out. And I think that we need to call attention to those members who take advantage of the legislation, because I don't know that of the 10 most consequential votes that I've had in the 33 years that I've been here now, that there'll be anything I will do that'll be more important than this. On the child credit, on the earned income tax credit, the child care credit, the retention tax credit, unemployment insurance, the checks of equity that will go out as well. These provisions are going to change lives. It addresses the issue of income inequality. 20% of the American people at the bottom end are going to directly benefit from this immediately. That's how important, again, and how consequential this legislation is. When you look at the numbers of what we were able to do in the committee on the Affordable Care Act, extending these price supports to members of the American family, it's something I'm really proud of, and I want to say this again, the Speaker's reinforcement on this. What we did with the multi-employer pension plans. 500 plans will be saved across the country. We added decades to the solvency of the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. And for those that don't know what that is, that's the backstop for the American pension system. When you think of people that are 75 or 76 or, well, maybe into their 80s and 90s, to be told that their pensions were going to be cut by 40 or 50%. This was not about malfeasance. This was not about corruption. It was about factors of the marketplace. Mergers, acquisitions, and deregulation. This is a huge victory, and I'm very proud of it. So we're delivering on our promises, and I can't wait until tomorrow morning. Thank you. My friend John Yarmouth, who really did a great job of melding these different conflicts from time to time together.
Thanks, Richie. I find myself in a common situation in that everything's been said, but not everyone said it. And I'm last, so I'm happy to do that first. As I've told you personally and publicly, thank you for the vote of confidence you have in me to allow me to participate in this. I want everybody to think back to November 4th, the day after the election, when we didn't get the result we wanted in the House. We didn't get the result we wanted in the Senate. We thought we would never have control of the Senate. We weren't sure whether we would have the presidency.
And here, just a few months later, we're about to pass one of the most consequential pieces of legislation in modern history. It's nothing short of a miracle that we have gotten to this point. And what I am so thrilled about and so excited to have been a part of is that, well, I know there's a narrative out there that Democrats are in disarray, and nowhere else in Washington could a 269-2 vote be considered a party in disarray if you had the Senate and House together. But we have come together as a party in the Congress to do something monumental, but something that also clearly reflects our values as a party. A commitment to using government to improve the lives of as many people as possible. And I just got out of the Rules Committee testifying before Rules, and it was almost comical to listen to the Republicans try to come up with the appropriate attack on this legislation. They're having a hard time doing it because, again, they voted for most of this a number of times. But one of the attacks was Bernie Sanders just said this was one of the most progressive pieces of legislation ever passed. So they're trying to tie Bernie Sanders around it. Well, of course it is. And the reason it is progressive is because there isn't a dollar in this bill that goes to the richest Americans. Not a dollar. 70% of it goes to low and moderate income Americans to help them deal with the economic tragedy of this pandemic. A very small amount goes to small businesses, an important amount, but a small amount. A very large amount goes to state, city, and local, county and local governments to help them deal with the added costs of the COVID, with lost revenues, and with giving them opportunities to help at their local level in solving some of the local problems that have resulted from the pandemic. So when we pass this bill tomorrow, I said after the Affordable Care Act that I didn't think I'd ever do anything as significant in Congress as I did that day. I'm revising my narrative now. And I think probably all of us who have been around for the last 10 years or so have maybe given up hope that we could do anything consequential again in Congress, where we prove we can. We're all not just proud of what we're about to do, but also energized by it. And I think we have, in a sense, changed the landscape of the American people's expectations of us. And that's both an opportunity, it's a daunting challenge, but also an opportunity. And I know that we're all committed to doing everything we can to even enhance our record on that score. So once again, thrilled to be a part of it, and I turn it back to the Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and we all give accolades to Mr. Yarmouth for his excellent work over the years as chair of the Budget Committee. I think I told you once before when I commended him for his great work and commended his staff and thanked him for commending his staff. In his closing remarks on the floor of the House last week, he said, was that 2 weeks now, a week and a half ago, he said, yes, the staff deserves so much credit, and so does some bourbon. So he's true to his roots. True to his roots. Oh, Kentucky first. That went without saying. Let me say that the staff of the Congress, personal staff, when I say personal, individual member staff, the staffs of the committees, the staffs of the leadership offices worked relentlessly, really 24/7 on different shifts to make sure we could meet this deadline in a values-based, precise way. This is a very complicated bill, and it took our best talent, all hands on deck. So I salute the staff, I salute the members, I salute our chairs. As you know, I have always credited our dazzling chairs with the excellent work that they brought to the table, whether it was this bill or other legislation related to crushing the virus and saving the lives and livelihoods of the American people. But having said that, I want to commend Chuck Schumer and the Democrats in the Senate for passing a very fine bill, very much like ours, some tweaks, but nonetheless, they did a great job in the Senate. But my praise right now goes to the President of the United States, Joe Biden. This is the Biden American Rescue Plan. It will be followed by the American Recovery Plan. And it's about just that, saving lives and livelihoods and giving people hope for the future. His presidency does just that. This legislation is a reflection of his values. Now, it looks a lot like our Heroes Bill. We had quite a bit of this in our Heroes Bill, but I'm so glad our shared values, plus enhanced by vaccines and so many other advances that are there, we couldn't be prouder than to be associated with him in this. And it's so sad because in all of the bills, as Mr. Hoyer said, we've had bipartisanship signed by the president. We have a Democratic president. All of a sudden, many of the same features of those other bills, in one size or another, are in this bill. And the Republicans have decided they cannot be for it. That's unfortunate. As I said, they'll take some credit for it in their districts, but we'll have more to say about that. But I do want to say this. I said earlier that there's some legislation, like the Butch-Lewis Act, that was so much a part of the pension bill, and the equities legislation that Mr. Clyburn was so much a part of, with the Congressional Black Caucus and the Hispanic Caucus and the Asian Pacific Caucus, shaping so that we have fairness in how the vaccines, et cetera, are distributed in other aspects of outreach for health. I just want to mention Rosa DeLauro. This Friday, I think it is, the 18 years ago that she first introduced the child tax credit refundability bill. And here we are. We did get some of that under President Bush in a bipartisan way, and now long overdue once again. So I want to salute her in that regard. But we can go on, and we will. We'll have so many presentations about this to praise our members, because they all made a valuable contribution to this. And we all are grateful to the President of the United States for his great leadership. Any questions? Yes, sir.
As you talk about the child tax credit,
yes,
that lasts for a year. So you present a situation where you're creating a fiscal cliff if it's not extended. So all these families are talking about lifting above the poverty scale could get knocked right back down.
Well, one thing that you should know about the tax code, getting something out of the code is oftentimes harder than getting something in the code. So I've already had some thoughts about how we're going to expand it and make it permanent. And I intend to share those in the near future. But what we did is unlikely to go away.
You want to share them now, like how you pay for it?
I've got some ideas I will share with you at the right moment. Yeah.
This is a very important issue for us. And as you know, this is a COVID-related legislation. So Chad, go ahead.
You talked about the Republicans might take credit for some of this. In a couple of days, you're probably going to be down in numbers. The Senate confirmed Marsha Fudge and Deb Haaland here. What does that mean with trying to move some of the other parts of your agenda if you're down right down to the edge and you're not getting any help from the other side of the aisle?
We're going to have elections. We are already in the course of one in Louisiana, where Mr. Cedric Richmond's person who will come in that capacity will be here. And then when they are confirmed, and hopefully it will be soon so that they can assume their places in the cabinet of the United States, they will have elections and they'll be replaced.
But you think you'll be able to get other support on some of these other initiatives?
No, it's not going to be a problem. Garrett?
Madam Speaker, I think even last fall when the last COVID relief bill passed, you were already talking about having to do another bill in the new administration. Do you think this is the last primarily COVID bill that you'll have to take up?
You're just going to have to ask the virus. If it stops mutating, if it stops spreading and therefore mutating, then this will be. And some of the provisions in here that have a fuse, like the expanded tax, the enhanced unemployment insurance benefit that goes until the fall. We'll just see where we are then. But it's not anything anybody can predict. It's just a question of the science, and we will have legislation to address it for as long as it's there. Any comments?
Can I ask that a different way? I mean, you've talked about the importance of crushing the virus.
That's
Are you
right.
confident the provisions in this bill can do that?
Yes, again, what is interesting about this virus is that it's resourceful. It mutates. It has variants. And so too must we be resourceful and resilient in how we deal with it. But we will be on top of it. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Are House Democratic leaders concerned about maybe losing some members, progressives, in this revised COVID-19 bill?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I can't. These leaders are concerned about what?
Are House Democratic leaders concerned about losing any members in the COVID-19 revised bill this time around?
I think we only lost 2 on the first time. And I think we at least cut it in half this time.
So we have a 50% increase in the number of people who left. But let me just say, our members have a good judgment, and they know that this legislation is just something historic and transformative, to return to those 2 words. And we are not giving up on the fight for 15. We've all been involved in it for years, and we will continue to be involved. And I'll talk more about that at my press conference on Thursday once we pass this bill and the rest. But no, they know. It's hard for us to understand how the Republicans can vote against this bill because it has such an impact on their constituents. Our members are well aware of that, and also the value, the intellectual excellence of what is in the legislation. So we feel pretty confident about it, and we thank you for your attention to our, I'm so excited I just can't hide it, kind of attitude. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Konst, and today is the first day of the rest of the Biden presidency. The rescue plan is done. There are some things I hate about it, most obviously the choice to abandon an increase in the federal minimum wage. But all legislation is sausage making, and there is no democracy without compromises, as much as we hate the people we're compromising with. Which is why we start again today. Now that this $1.9 trillion plan is done, let's take one moment to discuss what has gone right here. Like $1.9 trillion is a lot of money. And unlike the package that Donald Trump pushed through 4 years ago, which was roughly the same size, this goes much more to working people and far less to those who already have plenty, just to bail out for them on the government's dime. You know, they never talk about waste when it comes into their pockets. But the Republicans attacked this recovery plan as being filled with things that aren't really like an economic stimulus. Well, there's a sad truth in that, of course. But, you know, okay, we have to name it and celebrate it because right-wing Keynesian, which includes not only Reagan and Trump, but Clinton too, accepts that governments should prime the economic pump. But to that crowd, cutting taxes is just as good as building green energy plants. But progressives say it makes all the difference in the world how you spend the money, which is why the $1.9 trillion plan is worth talking about. It is the resurrection of an idea that government action, government spending can both prime the economy and make it fairer. This plan does more than any action by the federal government in generations to raise children out of poverty. This plan put cash in the pockets of working people, not enough, but at a moment of maximum economic uncertainty. This plan delays, although it doesn't totally resolve, the looming financial crisis of local governments, a crisis that could lead to the layoff of thousands of teachers, firefighters, and frontline workers central to bringing the pandemic to an end. So as I said, a lot to be glad about. But now we need to look ahead at the substantial challenges this plan does not address. I find it useful in thinking about the future of the Biden presidency and what we want from the Biden presidency to look at where this country right now actually stands right now. First, okay, the pandemic, it's not over, and it won't be for some time. You find this jarring, given all the happy vaccine news that dominates corporate media? So let's be clear. Vaccinating everyone is great. But it's not the end of the pandemic. It is the beginning of the end of the medical crisis. Once the medical crisis is behind us, the economic carnage will be clearer and right in front of Joe Biden's face. Do you think it's wrong of me to take satisfaction using the word carnage? I can't help it. I'm talking about real, profound human damage, not the made-up American carnage of Donald Trump and his insurrectionists. If carnage helps to capture how this economic crisis runs, then I'm going to use it. Think about this. In the two largest cities in America, New York and Los Angeles, you ready for this? 1 worker in 5 is either unemployed, working shortened hours, or so discouraged or so overwhelmed by caring for children, parents, and spouses that she has given up looking for work. Do I need to repeat that? 20% of New Yorkers and Angelenos have had their economic well-being upended by this pandemic. These are the statistics on the scale of the Great Depression. And it's what we see now. And this won't magically get better in a day once everyone is vaccinated. Yet we aren't hearing much about this or hearing the stories of economic struggle that these statistics represent. The death toll has been staggering, painful, and sobering. But it is only part of the story, which is why vaccinations are only the first step. President Biden, he plans to speak with the nation on Thursday. I hope he doesn't use this address to, congratulate himself. In fact, I will pitch it right here to take some of the heat off of self-congratulating by saying, congratulations, Mr. President. Okay, cool. The rescue plan is a good beginning. Now what we need to hear from you is, where do we go from here? How are we going to create good jobs and good wages so people can get back to work and live a decent life? How are we going to address the rampant scourge of unemployment and underemployment and exploitative employment that has left so many on the ragged edge of ruin and wasted so much potential talent? How are we going to get people out of debt? Personal debt, credit card debt, housing debt, student loan debt, medical debt. And Mr. President, how are we going to help those Americans who have just given up looking for work outside their homes? Disproportionately women. We need to raise the minimum wage. We need an infrastructure bill and a Green New Deal that will create jobs building a green economy. We need you to say that on Thursday. You know, the things that you promised. And one more thing, we need you to say that you know that for millions of Americans, this crisis isn't even close to being over. And that building back better is not a tweet. It is a commitment from you to all of us. After all, you still have 53 days left in your first 100 days. So let's use them. We have a terrific show today. Jason Stanley is here to talk about fascism, how to name it, see it, call it out, how it comes. And then Keenan Korth joins us to discuss the Nevada Democratic Party. I don't know if you guys heard this story. This happened over the weekend. The Nevada Democratic Party was voted out and replaced by a bunch of progressives. Except the staff of the Nevada Democratic Party decided, we're quitting, and then we're going to take all of our money from the Democratic Party with us so that the progressives now running the party don't have any money. Brilliant. Just great. Like it's basically disaster capitalism for the Democratic Party. Unreal. And later we have Akela, Lacy, and Simon Narode to talk about today's news. We will be right back after this break. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. Jason Stanley is the author of How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them. What a time to be talking about this. Jason, thanks for joining the show. He's also I'm going to say this wrong, Japin Urowski, professor of philosophy at Yale University. So if you're a student at Yale, go check out his class. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
So How Fascism Works, could you have written this book like maybe 6 years ago? So we could have...
Yeah, I mean, I had been writing about this topic for about a decade in the press. My first piece in the press ever was on birtherism in 2011. So
that.
Yeah. So and my second piece was called Media and Mistrust, and it was about Fox News.
I remember that. All right. So, I mean, it's in retrospect, it's always easy to say, oh, that's how we got there. But what were the things that we missed along the way that we should have known based on what you've examined through history? You know, whether it was the rise to World War II and Nazism and fascism in Italy, et cetera. What was like right there in front of our faces that we didn't stop?
Well, I think a lot of our a lot of my work is based in the Black radical tradition in the United States, which has looked at the ordinary institutions of the United States and seen strongly fascist tendencies within them. I mean, we live in a country with the world's highest incarceration rate, and and Black Americans our minority population that has been targeted for enslavement and other horrors, has one of the highest incarcerated, maybe the highest incarceration rate of the world of any ethnic group outside Uyghur Muslims. Right. So there are various features of our society that are sort of ready for this. Toni Morrison in 1995 gave a Howard address called "Racism and Fascism," talking about this. We've kept fascism located on our sort of directed in our police force, which Black Lives Matter has drawn our attention to, but it sort of hasn't sort of like expanded outside of aimed at a minority. It's mainly been aimed at minority and poor populations. So we had that in place. And then what we've seen over the past 2 decades is we've seen elite failure. So we've seen that paves the road for a positive social change as well as negative social change. It paves the road for people to come and say the elites have failed you and be right. Right. And so when we fail to have accountability for elite failure, it sets the agenda for a demagogue to come and say, look, you need a strong hand who's going to punish the elites, who's going to roll things back because to make sure that you don't lose your country to them, meaning the minorities, the leftists. So all of that is set up.
If you create a recipe for fascism, what would the ingredients be?
The ingredients would be minority populations that you could blame the troubles of the country on, elites that have failed you, that have clearly and manifestly been self-dealing. You'd have there are fascist movements all across the world right now, and there have been for quite some time, and they're linked. These ethno-nationalist movements in India, say, Brazil, we have a fascist movement. They're sort of linked. So you look for those links to international fascist movements, and you look for massive inequality, because when you have massive inequality, first you have what I would call, Toni Morrison called it fascist solutions to national problems. She said the United States is an addiction to fascist solutions to national problems.
What a line.
So yeah, so when you have massive inequality, then you need a militarized police force that has a police response to massive inequality. It's best to have a past where where you had a dominant majority that controlled the cultural institutions, that controlled everything. And so you can blame the problems of the present on the loss of that past.
So, okay, I'm just thinking about fascist movements throughout history and obvious one, Mussolini. Who are the minorities under Mussolini?
Right. So Mussolini didn't. Fascism in Italy doesn't start out. It starts out colonialist. The minorities are the Ethiopians, and it was Black Americans who called attention to this fact. Right. It was Black Americans who linked what was happening in Ethiopia to the racial struggle in the United States. So it was colonialism, and in the case of Mussolini, it was the colonial war in Africa. It was also colonialism in the case of Hitler. It was the desire, as Du Bois, as black writers such as Césaire and Du Bois clearly saw. Hitler bemoaned the loss of the African colonies in World War I. So it was the loss of colonies, the racial domination. Now, what you have in the United States is internal domination. You have internal colonialism. You have internal colonies. I think it's fair to regard what's happening in the kinds of cities that Trump wants to see have the vote removed from, disenfranchised. I think it's fair, or if you look at what happened with Flint, Michigan, and in general with the Emergency Manager Act, the kind of seizing control of Black majority cities, I think we can clearly talk of internal colonization in the United States. So we can see the same dialectic. With European fascism, it was external colonization. It was the desire to dominate Africa. Here, it's the desire to dominate our internal populations.
Is that sort of the future of fascism? I guess the question is, what is the future of fascism? How is it evolving? I mean, obviously, media today is very different than the radio waves, but
media is deeply involved.
Exactly. So that's,
case,
I live on YouTube. I'm aware.
Right. So these media, when you look at the Nazi use of radio, you see that the propaganda, which is central to any kind of fascist movement, mass spreading of conspiracy theories, mass spreading of just destruction of truth. They're going to use whatever media resources they have, and now is no different. It's just that we have different media.
So what does the future of fascism look like? Including this new way of spreading propaganda with tech companies just like looking the other way and not even caring or facilitating it.
Exactly. So we've got sort of a much more just as radio facilitated Hitler's speeches and mass propaganda in ways that was radio and film. Now we have new media that spreads conspiracy theories incredibly quickly. And whenever you look at a genocide right now, I mean, not whenever, I'm sure that actually what's happening in China is not based on this. But if you look at Myanmar, if you look at a number of the situations we faced, WhatsApp, a lot of the media is involved in spreading conspiracy theories. So we have that. We have, I think, an interlinked ethno-nationalist movements. Fascism looks different in every country. It's not the same story in every country. American fascism will look very different than Italian fascism or German fascism. But we have these links. Right now, I think if you look at the disenfranchisement that's happening in Georgia, that's happening in a number of states across the country in reaction to the 2020 elections and Democratic successes, I think you're seeing they're drawing both on the U.S. past, but also Hungary and Poland.
Interesting. How so?
Because in those countries, they've mastered the elections. They've gerrymandered. They've dominated the judiciary. You could see with Donald Trump's response to the judiciary sort of remaining fairly firm in response to the attempted coup, he was sort of shocked because that didn't happen in Hungary, that didn't happen in Poland. The judges sort of they replaced the judiciary quickly, and it quickly became a loyalist judiciary. I think what we've seen here is it's going to be not that hard to dismantle. It's going to be harder than in Hungary and Poland, and harder than in Brazil. But it's not by any means impossible to dismantle the press, the media, the press, the judiciary, the voting system. And so we've got these international techniques. Poland borrowed from Hungary. I mean, Viktor Orban now has total power in Hungary. And also you see a kind of fascism without the violence right now. You see a fascism without, like Hungary, Viktor Orban has complete, total one-person control of the country. And he's done that using the civil courts, using enormous fines and fees. So I think with a huge militarized police force, used to dealing with our problems with inequality, with one of the two major parties, ready to become a cult of the leader, just looking for the next one, and already signaling everything that needs to be signaled about its authoritarian tendencies, and with the massive wealth inequality and corruption.
I mean, in past fascist, when fascism rose, across Europe, right, there was always this like facilitation by the center left, right? So, I mean, in particular, Hitler, right? So I look at this situation, I think, well, why aren't the tech companies cracking down? I mean, I'm thinking 50 years from now, hopefully this is the end of the Trump era, but I'm guessing it's not, given, who's got the most popular shows on TV, Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro online, and these like extremists that are absolutely being boosted by tech companies. And 50 years from now, are we going to look back and say, okay, why didn't the Democrats do something about this? Because they were taking like a lot of their money, or there's always that like facilitation, right?
Well, there's different, Germany is one very particular thing. Italy is one particular thing. If we're seeing authoritarian creep here, and we're seeing facilitation happen in a number of different ways. I mean, you can look back at the way the Democrats in the 90s leaned into the Republican Southern strategy, thereby keeping white nationalism very much alive in both parties. Failing to deal with the torture regime after the Iraq War, or the consequences of the financial crisis, all of that will be looked at as facilitation, as
that's neoliberalism, though. But Rosa Luxemburg famously warned, how the center left was partnering with the wrong guys, or not standing up to the rise of Nazi Hitler. Yeah. So is this our moment? Are we sitting here when Joe Biden says, are we going to look back and look at Joe Manchin and say, thanks, Joe Manchin?
Yeah, right. Absolutely. I mean, I think, I tweeted that the minute he started mumbling about compromising with Republicans. I mean, we absolutely need something like a massive New Deal, a Green New Deal, something that makes every American think that government is working for them. Right. And rolls back this thought that government is this invisible thing that is really working for is just corrupt and helping minorities. And then we've got to deal with racial injustice, so we don't have these constant the constant uprisings against massive police violence and the carceral state that then a demagogue can use in their demagogic law and order campaign and say, I'm going to bring you law and order, as Nixon did, and as we saw Trump try to do twice. Trump did twice. So we need to deal with all of those problems, and that will require a kind of massive rethinking, and no more self-dealing with the oligarchs. And the oligarchs at some point are going to say democracy harms us. I mean, many of them already have. Many of them who are funding Trump and Trumpism, and aspects of the Democratic Party, in case that doesn't work, they have no allegiance to democracy. They're going to, when you have massive inequality, you're going to need ever more beefed up security sources, ever more surveillance to prevent any kind of rebellion, and all of that leans into a fascist future.
I've learned about that from the Harry and Meghan interview. Massive surveillance, security is needed. Wow, inside the mind of basically a kingdom. I mean, it's I joke about it, but it's true. I mean, it's a colonial state. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we that's the other thing. This idea that somehow you can get beyond, that you can get to the point where everyone is democratic. Democracy is a fantasy. Democracy is an ideal. Very few people have lived under democracy. No one probably has lived under an actual democracy. Mm-hmm. So democracy is an ideal. You see it all around you. We saw it all around us during the Trump era. Many people want a dictator. Many people want, Plato in the Republic, in his criticism of democracy, is that most people don't want freedom. They want a strong leader to worship. They want to chant, I love you. And so that will always be a portion of society. That's right. And they will always want something like a monarch.
It's so funny because I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, when I'm from New York and very familiar with Andrew Cuomo, and I remember the beginning of the pandemic, people, before it was as it moved into the Cuomo sexual thing, people were just worshiping him. And when I said it, being very familiar with Andrew Cuomo, it was I think it's because people want to feel in control, and he's channeling that control. And now we've got Biden. So, suddenly the things are sticking. The stories that have always been there, are sticking.
Cuomo always had this kind of authoritarian, strongman kind of character to him. It's that aspect of things is neither left nor right. And Cuomo had that. Cuomo had a kind of,
I'll take care of you, lady.
Right, exactly. And that's a successful political way.
Kill your grandparents too, along the way.
Yeah. So that's, people are attracted to that as a form of rule. I think it's a dangerous form of rule. I think, maybe you could have a really good leader who employs that for propaganda purposes. But ultimately, you don't want to in a democracy to have, a person who is your charismatic leader. AOC is a charismatic leader, and she might be able to harness, frankly, some anti-democratic charismatic leadership into power that she would then use, I think, for the people. But ultimately, that's what she's not, obviously. I think it's very difficult in this kind of fascist machismo to do that with a woman, and you don't see AOC's leadership in any sense like that. But people want someone to worship, admire, and follow. That's what you saw with Andrew Cuomo over the summer, when, without any good reason, people just, as you said,
it was like their therapy. Yeah,
it was therapy.
It was.
Leadership, because freedom, because in time when you become fearful, what an authoritarian leader wants you to do is become fearful, and when you become fearful, you feel like you need a strong leader. Right. And that's dangerous for democracy.
There was a leadership vacuum too. You do a lot of work around propaganda as well. And I'm curious are there I know this sounds, especially for our audience, we could probably identify right-wing propaganda and corporate propaganda as well as anybody, but it's gotten much more sophisticated. Can you kind of describe what the evolution of propaganda looks like now?
Well, I think to some extent, it hasn't gotten more sophisticated in that, so if you look at my book, my second to last book was called How Propaganda Works. My last book was called How Fascism Works. And How Fascism Works, I talk about how Hitler had this, there was a propaganda campaign about Black Senegalese soldiers occupying the Rhineland, the Black Horror on the Rhine. And it spread worldwide, let's save the poor German women from the occupying French army. And, 17,000 people gathered in Madison Square Garden in New York City to protest, the Black Horror on the Rhine. So in a sense, this kind of fear-mongering propaganda, the structure of fascist propaganda, which is what I'm looking at in that last book, the structure of fascist propaganda, they're here, they're going to destroy your family, they're going to take your women, you need a strong leader to protect your women, the real authentic people live in the countryside, the cities are diseased. It's remarkable the degree to which we are seeing the same tropes over and over and over again, sent to our iPhones more rapidly. But my job in the propaganda conferences I go to is to remind people that the structures we're seeing are familiar, just repackaged and sent more quickly.
There are propaganda conferences?
There are many propaganda conferences.
I love this. I want to go to, oh my gosh, Dorsey, our producer. We got to go to the next propaganda conference when they have one in real life. We've got to cover this. This is amazing. Sam Cedar covers torts. We cover propaganda. He says, yes. So you got to let us know. Keep us in the loop. What's the best propaganda conference? And we are on it. Jason Stanley, super interesting. Go check out his book. This is, who publishes your book? Hang on a second. Is it Verso?
Penguin
I apologize. There we go. It's How Fascism Works, the politics of us and them. You can go check it out at indiebound.org. We got that one up there right now. Go to a local place. Get rid of that Amazon addiction because they're facilitating this. They're facilitators, the fascist state. It's so ironic that you can buy this stuff on Amazon anyways. They'll take it, I guess. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, we will be back in just a couple of seconds with Keenan Korth to talk about the Nevada Democratic Party. This is an insane story. I can't wait to talk about this. This is like candy for me. All right, we'll be right back. welcome back to the Nomiki Show. Keenan, look at you, looking sharp. Keenan Korth is friend. I should start with that. Full disclosure, he's my friend. He's a consultant with Progressive Consulting. He's a communications specialist. He ran Amy Villela. He managed Amy Villella's huge primary campaign for Congress in Nevada a couple of years ago. You may have seen him in Knock Down the House. I watched it again recently and I was like, oh, there's Keenan. I don't think I paid that much attention last time. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, this story is bonkers. I am so excited people are now talking about, I mean, it's only been a couple days, but that it's getting the attention that it deserves. All right, let's start from the beginning. You're a member of DSA, you're a progressive.
Mm-hmm.
You've been a big part of this take over the Democratic Party effort. And let's just remind folks what happened in 2016 in Nevada with the Democratic Party.
Yeah, so a lot of what we've accomplished this past cycle, this past year, this past weekend is definitely a result of lessons learned and the experiences that folks on the left here in Nevada had from 2016. We had a very close caucus here in 2016 between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. Folks got very mobilized in that caucus to convention process after the precinct level. And, I'm sure folks are familiar with the county level caucus where Bernie delegates, alternate delegates, briefly overturned the results. That effort did not succeed through the state level, but it was definitely an informative part of our strategy here in 2020 and 2021 now about the opportunity there is coming out of the caucus based on how our state party is structured.
And just for folks who just to jog their memories, this was the chair throwing thing. What happened with the chair throwing thing?
So the chair throwing was at the state level convention this was in the aftermath of folks at the county level having, briefly overturned those results by, capitalizing on the alternate delegate process. So again, it didn't.
And what had happened? What did they say?
So there were allegations that Bernie supporters were on the verge of rioting, that someone had thrown a chair. That is still a hotly contested, issue here in Nevada. I know there's plenty online about it on Snopes, in particular, kind of debunking that claim. But we are well versed in chair throwing jokes on both sides of the aisle here.
the Democratic aisle. Okay. So you guys have been working your butts off to reform this party, the Nevada Democratic Party. Let's remind folks, this is also Harry Reid. Harry Reid is still a very present force in Nevada, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, Harry Reid has helped build one of the strongest Democratic parties in the nation, alongside of organizers at the Culinary Union. Las Vegas, Nevada, is a union state. It's a union town. It's a modern 21st century union town where our workforces are in the entertainment and service industry, majority women workforces, majority people of color, majority immigrant workforces that have a lot of, political power through their unions and their labor organizing. And that's part of why I think Nevada is such fertile ground for progressive organizing, because of some of those dynamics. The Reid machine has been extraordinarily successful. They've won 4 of the last 4 presidential races here. We have 2 Democratic senators. Without them, we would not have the slim majority we have in the Senate right now. We elected our first Democratic governor in 20 years.
Wow.
So the dynamic here is not quite so black and white as I think a lot in the media want to make it. But what we see here is a successful party who has made a lot of gains. But if you look deeper than that, the trend is alarming for what we might be facing in 2022 with the midterms underneath a Democratic administration and Senate majority and House majority. And there are folks here that are not happy with what has happened this past week in the Democratic Party,
So
thinking that
let's
if it
get to
ain't
that.
broke, don't fix it. You know?
Right. Okay.
But,
So what happened? Because we're kind of like leading up to this big
yeah.
moment.
So this past weekend we had our Nevada Democratic Party statewide officer elections. So that's chair of the party, first vice chair, second vice chair, secretary, and treasurer. Those 5 officers sit on the state party executive board, which is composed of 14 additional at-large members allocated between Clark County, Washoe, and the rurals, as well as our DNC committee man and committee woman, and then the chairs of our 4 statewide caucuses, the Rural Caucus, the Young Dems, the Native American Caucus, and the newly ratified statewide Nevada Black Caucus. So there's 25 members. The 5 elections we had this weekend were limited to just those officer positions. So those elections kind of for those different executive board seats happen at various times throughout the cycle. Those at-large members, those 14 at-large members were up for election over the summer at the state convention through that caucus to convention process, from that precinct to county to state level, ultimately to the DNC. And that's when we really started seeing the power of our organizing, when we contested, I believe, 12 out of those 14 at-large seats and won 11 of them. And then later in the summer, there was a special election for our second vice chair officer position, where we elected Dr. Zafar Iqbal, who was a 2020 Nevada Bernie State co-chair, as well as the founder of both the Nevada Muslims for Bernie organization, and since then has founded a chartered Muslim Democratic Club here in Clark County, one of our most engaged and progressive clubs. So he won in a landslide then, and that's when we knew if we stay organized, keep our foot on the gas, we can win these officer elections.
So you ended up winning, and then everyone was excited, and then what happened?
So
you took over all the seats, by the way, right? All of the
yeah. So we won outright 4 of the 5 seats live in that meeting. Dr. Iqbal, who was the only candidate running for re-election, the other 4 officers were all stepping down. 2 of them who had been in those roles for decades. So it's definitely no matter what happened, it was going to be a big leadership change. We won, again, 4 of those seats outright in that meeting. The treasurer's race initially, it was the closest of the 5 races. Wow. There was a 2-point margin coming out of that meeting with the other candidate ahead. But immediately following the adjournment of that meeting, our tellers committee met to canvass the results and certify them. And this is messy stuff. We're operating remotely via Zoom. Our tellers committee had a very short window as people signed on to vet them to see if they were members or guests. Guests are permitted to attend. So what happened was, in that rush, there were a few folks that were both erroneously marked as guests who were members. Unfortunately, were kind of disenfranchised from a couple of these votes. In certain cases, it was corrected in time for later votes. But there were also a handful of folks who were guests who were erroneously marked as members and able to vote. And so when those votes were scrutinized and those ineligible votes were eliminated, the result of the treasurer race, all of the results shifted a little bit, a few less votes in each case. But in the treasurer's race, we went from preliminary results of 233 to 230, down to 233 to 231, down to 227 to 230. So we went from down 2 votes to up 3 votes. And the next day when the results were certified, all 5 of our candidates did indeed win and were assuming office.
Okay, so then it gets really dramatic, but what I want to do, are you around to stick? We have Akela Lacy here today who wrote a story on this. Would you be cool
Yeah,
with jumping on the panel in a couple of seconds and
sure,
just in discussing the
sure,
drama part with, are you cool with that?
sure.
Like 10 more minutes, don't worry. I know I'm just throwing that in your lap, but it's a tight show and I'm
Yeah.
like, there's so much to this story that I definitely want to unpack. Okay. Stick around. We're just going to come back after like a brief little break with our panel and we'll talk about what they did to punish you. All right, welcome back. Surprise, surprise, Akela. Akela Lacy is a politics reporter at The Intercept, and she actually just published a piece on this Nevada story. Keenan, Akela, I'm sure you guys know each other, so.
We just met yesterday over the phone.
How perfect is this? So this piece came out with Ryan Grimm and Akela. Super interesting story. So we just kind of discussed the lead up to what happened. Like the vote happened, the progressives won, and I want to ask Keenan how the Democratic Party responded. And this is Simon Narode, who's part of our team. Sorry, who's joining the panel. We're looping back real quick. Simon Narode was part of Bernie 2020, excuse me. Okay, so Keenan, what happened with the Democratic Party? What did they do? What did the staff do?
So before the meeting on Saturday had even formally concluded, some folks were already speaking to the press here, leaking some information about imminent resignations of staff at the state party, information about money being transferred. I believe it was $450,000 from the state party bank account to the DSCC. We have a reporter here, John Ralston. I'm sure you're all familiar. We were talking about throwing chairs just a few minutes ago, who was, putting this information out on Twitter, fanning the flames between this intra-party divide that we have between the progressive wing and those who have been in power for a long time, which is nothing new to us here in Nevada. He's been doing that for a long time. But it, was certainly disappointing to see some of the immediate reactions from the party. But we were always operating under the premise that we should hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. I think ultimately we landed somewhere in the middle.
Really? There was something worse than purging the party of its staff and all of its resources?
We knew that our executive... We knew that our executive director was leaving, Alana Mounts. She's helped lead the party these past couple cycles. She had publicly announced that she would be stepping down as our executive director and moving into a role with the DNC. So we knew that there were going to be some staffing changes. There was never any intent to fire folks across the board, although there are rumors that folks said that it's not true. So it's unfortunate that folks don't feel like they can work with us, but that's nothing new to us on the left. We've always known that we have to show people that we are professionals, that we know how to organize, that we're serious about winning. And the left is gaining experience and power and building infrastructure every day, cycle after cycle. There's more there, and we feel like we're really well poised to take the reins of the state party and raise the money we need to raise to win in 2022. Judith Whitmer, our new chair, said repeatedly on the campaign trail she's not willing to concede a single seat, and we intend to make good on that. We know that for a lot of people, they're going to need to see us succeed before they'll believe we're able to do it, and that's exactly what we intend to do.
Akela, what did you discover when you were covering the story in terms of like the relationship between DSA, for instance, and the part? I mean, this is just such an amazing dynamic to see how DSA got like as involved as, and I know Keenan was involved in that, but what did you discover, Akela?
So, I mean, it's obviously like this is a tension that has been brewing for, well back before like 2016. I mean, as Keenan has alluded to, and a lot of the kind of critics of the new party chair, Judith Whitmer, and some of the other candidates on the slate, when we were talking to them, were sort of saying, taking the line that these people had been kind of upstarts in this sphere for a long time, weren't making things easy for anyone in the Democratic Party, hadn't been, I'm paraphrasing kind of what people said to us, hadn't been working to build relationships with other people, sort of all of these things about reasons that they didn't want to work with this new party, or this new slate of candidates, which is ironic. And I mean, we get at this in the story. Like, I think this anecdote sort of encapsulates the situation pretty well, that the DSA slate ran as the progressive slate and the establishment slate ran as the progressive unity slate, sort of pushing this angle that like, oh no, they're the people who are making problems. Like they're the people that are causing issues. Like we're the ones who actually want to keep the party together, when in reality, they were trying to consolidate their power to keep people out of this system. So, I mean, I think that is really key. The other thing that I think is even more interesting, like we talk about, covering politics in DC and covering this, like, it's not that abnormal per se to expect staffers to clear out or to have some turnover with a new executive director of the party. But the fact that they took severance and that they emptied the party's bank accounts and funneled them to out-of-state consultants and also to the DSCC. I mean, you can't write a better story than that. Like, it's very, very clear what their intention was, which was to sort of decimate the infrastructure and leave people with kind of no resources in their toolbox to move on. And so, I mean, that's really what came through when we were talking about this, and just very clear that, there was a lot of animosity here, and people, I mean, the other interesting aspect that I want to bring out, and that I think we included in the piece, is that Senator Cortez Masto asked Judith to drop out of the race and approached her opponent about running. And this is like a little bit of a wrinkle, because I think, it's not a super clear line in this piece of the story as far as like, oh, like they don't want Bernie people, because Tick Sagerblom was Bernie's chair in Nevada in 2016 and 2020. But the establishment thought that he would be a person who would let them have a little bit more control and let them have a little bit more of a say than the new executive chair in this case. So just very sort of quintessential establishment versus insurgent dynamic. But there's a lot of interesting wrinkles, and I mean, Keenan can speak to a little bit more of that. But it's a pretty fascinating story. And I just want to give a props to the Las Vegas Journal-Review that reported this first at the local level and got a lot of these details out and laid the groundwork for us to sort of continue reporting it out.
Which I'm just being who I am, I'm curious, which were the consultants that, do you guys know who they gave the money to, and what are their Twitter handles?
John Ralston, I think there's a screenshot of it somewhere floating around that I can try and dig up while we're on here, but I don't have the names off the top of my head. Maybe someone else might.
My understanding is mostly money was transferred to the DSCC.
How is that even?
Obvious.
That's not legal, guys. You have to sorry, that's goes against DNC rules. You can't just do that. Okay, sorry.
Well, I mean, a lot of Mounts is also, is now going to be working for the DNC, which is interesting. I mean, I'm not suggesting that there's any sort of coordination there, but I'm sure there's some sort of I'm sure they thought about that. I don't know, but I agree with you. It does not seem above board.
I mean,
leave
it's
at
it's
that.
not like I'm gonna guess that usually the state party has to meet and you have to discuss what you do with those funds, and you're supposed to have a budget committee, which of course nowhere in the DNC ecosystem actually exists. Like they'll show you a pie chart and they'll be like, oh, we spent a quarter of our money on GOTV, a quarter of it on media, a quarter of it on expenditures, and they're like, and then the rest was is in our fund, and they're like, there's your budget after we spent it.
Well,
It's
that
unreal.
that's at the state and local level. That is something our slate ran on. Is in particular, our treasurer Howard Beckerman is simply increased transparency, more details on those kinds of reports. Obviously, these resignations and these contract cancellations came presumably after the election, aside from Alana, who already we knew was outgoing. But the money transferred did happen before, I will note, before the election. So it was, I guess they were also hoping for the best, planning for the worst from their perspective. I will say, I think there's this assumption that we don't know what we're doing, and that if they starve us of resources, we won't be able to succeed. But one thing I can attest to on the left is that we are indeed very resourceful. We have built, I spoke to it earlier, building new infrastructure every cycle. There are incredible folks on the left who do small dollar fundraising, high dollar fundraising from individuals who do incredible outreach, digital outreach.
It shouldn't be on, the burden should be on you. I mean, like, this is the crazy thing to me, is like the DNC, remember the 50 state strategy? Like, remember how like the DNC is supposed to support state parties? Remember all this stuff? And it's like, I mean, with all due respect, that you guys are resourceful and you're smart, but it shouldn't be on you. I mean, that's how you lose like 1,000 seats. Like you starve your party.
It is on us now, because we control the party, and they can, they can take $500,000 away. But the bottom
demand it from
line
Jamie
is,
Harrison. Say, Jamie.
Well,
you left us out to dry.
The bottom line is that we have to raise 20 times that, if not more, over this next 2-year cycle to be competitive and win. And we knew that going into this. We fully intend to. And for what it's worth, the media around this, I don't think John Ralston was anticipating that this would actually work in our favor the way he reported it. I think he's one of these people who assumes that we are absolutely hapless. But the response, from Akela's article, other reporting on this, nationwide has been incredible. I think there's an incredible amount of excitement out there. And whether we're starting $500,000 in the hole, or whether that money comes back when they realize that we are serious and capable of winning, it's a huge motivating factor. And folks are already from all across the country reaching out to us and the new officers, wondering how they can donate. So if I could make a plug
how can people donate if you've got some money to help them survive?
It's very simple. Just visit nvdems.com/2022. That will take you to Act Blue. You can make a contribution there. We've been raising thousands and thousands of dollars already from small dollar donors in the short time that we have been in control. And I think there's always going to be bad feelings coming out of elections, whether they're, for public office or intra-party. And, folks that lose are not going to be happy about that. And there was not, immediate olive branches coming out. Some of the details were disappointing to see. But I think folks have kind of sobered up a little bit, and they realize, like we do, what's at stake in 2022. And so we have seen a great deal of cooperation from Alana and the outgoing officers, and that's what's been able to help us, move swiftly and efficiently in this transition to get all this up and running, so that we can fundraise and that we can specifically, I think, capitalize on an extraordinary amount of excitement nationally from the progressive base, from the socialist left, who I think folks are excited across the board. I think a lot of folks are floored, quite frankly, that we've at least for us here in Nevada answered this question that's been plaguing the left when we engage in electoral work, as to whether or not the Democratic Party can or cannot be taken over. I think we've answered that it can be. I think the second part of that is it worth it? And we absolutely intend to show that it is. So.
Keenan, awesome work. Go check it out. We got the website there. We'll put it in the info section. Thanks for joining us today, Keenan. We're going to stick around.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Keep up the amazing work. Keep us updated. We're going to stick around. We're going to do a regular panel. If you guys have a few minutes, you cool with that?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. So I want to start off because we didn't have an opportunity to talk about the Meghan Markle. I'm so sorry. It's just so juicy. I love it. But it's like, Hillary Clinton, this was such an interesting angle. Hillary Clinton, who didn't speak out on the $15 minimum wage, hasn't spoken out on the $1.9 trillion stimulus package. She felt like it was her time to speak up about the Meghan Markle, Prince Harry situation after the interview. Dorsey, do we have that? It's not a clip. It's just an article up in the Daily Mail. She says that it was outrageous, that what the cruelty that Meghan Markle faced was outrageous. And this is true, but I think I was watching the interview and I was thinking to myself, this is so fascinating because you're seeing an instrument of colonialism, like revealed. They're pulling back the curtain in a raw way. And in a way it kind of, but then like there's safe spaces with like the elite woke crowd of the US. And I think it like kind of illustrates the dynamics of capitalism right now. Like they're not really ready to go full on like burn it down because they're hanging out with like Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey and Hillary Clinton's backing them up. But like it's like a step. I don't know. I mean, it was just let's start with Simon. What do you think of this scenario? Because it's clearly like hitting a nerve with people, and I'm trying to figure out why.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those moments where this upper echelon of people is starting to catch up with the public sentiment. There is a lot of criticism of the monarchy around the sort of legacy of like racism and colonialism, etc. And of course Hillary Clinton is right in this instance, but it's definitely one of those things where I feel like it doesn't feel revolutionary to say that this group of people is not quite there on race, so I feel like that's sort of why it's very easy for Hillary Clinton in this moment to speak out against it, and for other celebrities to do so as well, because there's no negative social consequences for them to do so. It's less true. That is less true when it comes to things that you had mentioned, like the $15 minimum wage and stuff like economic issues far behind on.
What do you think, Akela?
Yeah, I totally agree with Simon's take on this. And I mean, I think your connecting it to, how capitalism works is an interesting point in the sense that and I mean, this has been something that people have been sort of like flinging at why are all these corporations getting behind BLM? And why are all these institutions that don't give a shit about anything jumping on this bandwagon? And I think to Simon's point, it is because it's easy, but I think, the counter argument to this is that there's something wrong fundamentally with this movement, which I think people are sort of adopting that, being if Hillary Clinton is talking about this, if I don't know, what was the Gushers was tweeting about Black Lives Matter or something like that in last June, then there's something fundamentally wrong with actually trying to bring attention to this stuff. And I think that is underestimating the intelligence of our society, in that obviously people are once it becomes palatable to say these things, then everyone's going to jump on board. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be having these conversations. And I think part of what's interesting about the Markle interview is that it gets at this race class discussion that so often colors many of the debates that we have on the left, as far as oh no, it's one versus the other. And this is a very clear example where this is one of the most privileged people in the world. They're sitting, aren't they neighbors with Oprah or something? Someone was telling me about this, and it's just yeah. And even when you have all of these kinds of things, this is still a situation that you might be finding yourself faced with. And so I think it sort of is a good example, at least for, how we can guide these conversations and kind of talk about how like it really isn't just one thing or the other. And like that doesn't mean that you can't talk about someone's extreme privilege, but it does mean but it means that like, these things are still valid issues and they do impact people's lives in meaningful ways. Not saying that, like Archie needs to be a prince, but
I mean, you need security. Come on.
Right. There needs to be, like your grandparents shouldn't be asking what color your skin is. Like that has, psychological impacts on a child. And so anyway, that's what I think.
I think it's interesting because like there's a couple things happening here. And I'm so glad that you brought that to mind. Like even with privilege, they're still facing systemic racism. Even the grandparents, the family seem to have, at least at one point, like the queen at least, more respect and forward thinking. I mean, I watched The Crown. She was the forward thinking one. But even then, it's like the institution itself was the one that could not rid itself of this disgusting racism and this obsession with pleasing the right-wing media and, a lot of other stuff as well. But like, what I think is so interesting about this is that it shows you like they're not full on socialist yet. I think Meghan could get there because she was calling for unions. And like it was like an amazing little moment where I used to be, represented by a union. I could just go to my union rep. Like there was no HR for me because I wasn't a staffer. But what they were doing was they were criticizing an institution, which is something that neoliberals do not do. That is the difference. They'll put the hashtag, woke BLM, whatever it is, name a street BLM. But they won't go to the heart of the institution of, defunding the police, and that I think is why I find this really interesting is like they were part of the institution and now they're like, this is how it runs.
It's definitely one of those instances where you're reminded that it takes a lot more than just getting someone who can recognize the issue and talk about the issue is on the right side of an issue into a position of power or something like that. It's, for example, it takes more than just electing Bernie Sanders to, rid the capitalist exploitation that we're all plagued with in the United States, or it takes more than just getting someone in there, because it's of course important to recognize it's the institution itself that's designed in such a way that is going to be marginalizing certain groups of people, is going to be disproportionately harming the poor and the people of color and things like that.
It's kind of like the theme of the show today. You have to rip apart institutions. Okay, I want to. There is this montage. You guys probably saw this about like the British were all watching the CBS interview in America on like I don't know on the internet, and so they had a unique response to our ads.
Oh God!
British people reacting to it. Wait, scroll back, Dorsey. I have to read it. British people reacting to American pharmaceutical ads during the Harry Meghan interview, and now this is what their reactions are. If these medicine ads are what it's like to not have NHS, I never want to experience that. Is there another one? I think there's another one. Yeah, the medicine in American ads more lethal than the thing they're treating. The guy confused. LOL, these American ads, though, totally forgot about medicine being advertised out there. It's too good. American ads are so funny. How are they advertising medicine?
Right.
Anyways, it was beautiful because clearly we.
Can I just say one of my favorite ones of those was, it was like, at the end of the ads, how they say like, talk to your doctor about this, and then someone responded like, why am I telling my doctor what to, like, that's so backwards, It's just that's crazy what we've been conditioned to see as normal.
You're going to have like a British Medicare for All movement now. Oh, I'm watching the Meghan interview recording, and yet again, I can't understand why American TV ads are like, ask your doctor or tell your doctor. Why the fuck would you be the one to tell a doctor what medicine to give you? Maybe I'm too European to get it, but what the fuck? Someone should just do like a montage of Europeans being like reacting to it, like in America, like what is going on? Why did I just spend like $30,000 on a broken arm? Like
there's I can't remember what channel put this together, what they like went and compiled a bunch of like short interviews where they're asking random Europeans on the street to like guess the cost of some medical service in the United States, guess the cost of an ambulance ride in the United States, and they're guessing and they're like don't even know where to begin because it's never something they've ever thought to have to pay for, and then and they're just blown away.
I had this is probably too much. I had a boyfriend in Greece and from Greece, and he like came and he like did not understand. He came to visit. And he was just every step of the way, like he had no. I was like, no, you can't go to the hospital for that. And he's like, why? I could just no, you can't go to no. We're treating it like you're not like you don't understand how expensive. Oh, it's not going to be that expensive. No, it is. You don't understand. You can't just go for everything. He's like,
I find it hilarious also that we treat having like millions of medicines that do the same thing as like a luxury, when it's like, I'm like, no, like that's purely so that corporations can profit off of one another and create this like false sense of competition. And they would actually probably be much better if we had one that actually did the job for each thing. But
as we're all learning through this vaccine situation, like we're watching it all play out in a very strange way, even though we're not paying for the vaccine. But anyways, Akela, Lacy, Simon, Narode, thank you for this very unique show, all about institutions and breaking them apart and how institutions facilitate fascism. That was the top of the show. And we're ending with, making sure that we too can one day have an NHS.
Thank you for having us as always.
Yes,
thank you. And thank you to everybody in the chats. I know you're all there right now. Hey, I got to do a little promo before I forget. If you're not a patron, join us at patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. You can get a mug. You can get a bag. I have it with me. There's all sorts of stuff. And of course, if you're a member of our book club, we got a bunch. I have like a day of interviews coming up because I've been reading like crazy, as you all know. I had to get new glasses. I'm sure you saw. But I've been reading like crazy, and there's a day of interviews with our authors for this month's book club. So you're going to get them all at once. It's a good weekend. Like, if you've got more than one book, because there's different levels, you can join and read 1 book a month, 2 books a month, or 4 books a month. For the 4 books a month and 2, you're going to get a bunch of all at once, because that is where I'm spending my time. And my books, I would show you my book right now, but it's like covered in notes. I'll do that next time. But anyways, go check us out at patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. Sign up for our amazing book club. And something's going on, Dorsey. I'm not seeing. Can you repost all the comments? It's not going through for some reason. Sorry, guys. Here we go. There was a little issue. Ray Lee, thank you so much. We all hate drama in our own lives, but I can't help nerding out on drama, Nevada Dems, and the Royals from afar, like moth to the flames. # we are all sinners. Exactly. And Kosin, thank you for the love. Nomiki, I have a way you can grow your sub base. Live stream your reaction to an episode of anime. Take recommendation from the community and watch certain scenes. One Punch Man is a good place to start. You'll like it. Oh boy. I'll think about it. Kowalski from Nebraska, thank you for the love. Ray Lee, we got that already. Sorry, guys. Kowalski says nothing. I'm having some glitchiness on here. I'm sorry. There's something going on with my Zoom. Harvey K, Professor Harvey K is in the live chat. Thank you for always joining the live chat on YouTube and Twitch. And Midi Docs and Mario for working those algorithms. And huge thanks to our YouTube moderators, Bob C, Chokin, The Orb, and Chuck Diesel. And Dorian Sapiens, A Difficult Truth, Nightbot, Our Means, and Nug Wrangler on Twitch for keeping our chat room troll free. All right, we will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow. We have Janice Dean on. She is the one who is pushing hard on the Cuomo nursing home scandal. She's a Fox News anchor. This is going to be quite an interview. She has a book out, really fascinating. And she's genuinely very nice. I think I wonder where she's doing at Fox now. I don't know, but she doesn't get political usually. So it will be a super interesting interview. You've got to hear it. Really excited about that one tomorrow. All right, we'll see you tomorrow, 3 o'clock Eastern. Stay in solidarity.